Welcome back to the Solid Verbal. Boys and girls, my name is Ty. His name is Dan. Thanks for joining in.
Oh my God, your voice, Ty. The
Welcome
register,
back.
it's hitting.
It's a Q&A episode. I did a different intro than I usually do.
That's
Normally
true.
It's just muscle memory and boys and girls. And no. We got questions from the Verballerhood. Dan, I'm going to play the sound right off the top.
Congratulations, Skippy. You've got
like
mail.
You've got mail on the Solid Verbal.
Let's mix it up here a little bit at the top, sir. How are you?
I'm good. We're recording this. Is today President's Day? Did I get that right?
Believe so, yes.
Who's
Correct.
your least favorite president ever, Ty?
Well,
Right on the spot, Ty. You have any John Tyler thoughts? No?
why don't we just move on to a different
I
question,
tried.
sir? I don't want to get in hot water.
Okay.
This is a college football show, man.
That's fair. All right.
How are you?
I'm good, Ty. I'm good. We have a number of really, really strong questions. I just had a smoothie because I'm trying to do right, trying to get tight, get right. I turned 40 this year, Ty. You know, I'm trying to live my life. So I'm very excited for these questions, and I'm a little bit bummed out, and I'm sure we're going to get into it because we're in that zone, right? It's too far ahead of the draft. Spring practice isn't really a thing yet because it's mid to late February as we record this. The national championship is done, recruiting is done, that there seems like there's not a lot to talk about, but something that everybody can agree on is things are looking sad for the Pac-12, even worse than what we thought they would be, and that makes me sad, Ty. So I'm trying to stay positive with my outlook here this morning. We've got a lot of good quality college football questions, but I wish there was something more positive that we could hang our hats on in terms of news.
Well, look, we put a call out across Twitter, across Instagram, across obviously our Patreon over at verballers.com, both on Discord and on Patreon proper, to get some last minute questions to put this show together. We, as always, got great questions that I'm excited to dive into with you. Email as well, still a thing, solidverbal@gmail.com. We had questions there that we're going to try and go through as many as we can. If we have to, we'll break it off into 2 shows, but we won't put the cart before the horse here. We'll see how we do. Don't forget to hit subscribe or follow whatever your podcasting app of choice allows you to do. Dan and I will be with you all throughout the long, cold months of the off season at a minimum twice a week. Of course, you can get bonus content if you're going out to verballers.com. And last but certainly not least, we got a newsletter, quickslants.solidverbal.com. I'm putting that out every Thursday if you were ever so inclined. If you want just like a quick wrap up with a little bit of personality, not too much.
Right.
I don't want to scare people away, but a little bit of personality, a little bit of college football news every Thursday afternoon, Dan. That's what we're doing.
All right. I love to see you're doing a bang up job with Quick Slants. So
Thank you. I wrote like 1,700 words last week, which is a little much. It's a
Those-
little long on the tooth. But
I'll be honest with you, Ty. I thought your fingers were retired, Settle. I thought you were done with that kind of just action, that
There are a
kind
lot
of
of people.
pursuit.
there are a lot of, we know a lot of people
Yeah.
who got their start as writers, sports writers, and then migrated over into podcasting and just can't write anymore,
Yeah.
or don't have the desire to write anymore.
Radio,
a lot of people like
TV,
that.
yeah.
So I'm trying to, I mean, I guess I kind of got my start that way, but I'm now trying to migrate back in the other direction a little bit.
Do you feel like you fulfilled the promise and the title of the next great American sports writer? Because that's
circa 2006. Yeah.
that was the honor and title bestowed upon you. Do you feel like you attained that, you sort of moved in the direction of that potential, or no?
That was 17 years ago.
Somebody has been born and started driving and can now go see
Kids
an
are
R-rated
being
movie.
recruited. They
Yeah.
are being recruited.
Yeah.
Who were born around the same time I won that damn contest. Yeah.
Fox Sports.
Also, on a related note, before we get into real questions, Dan and I had a lengthy discussion earlier about graying temples. So,
Yeah.
with that being said, here's the sound again.
Congratulations, Skippy. You've got mail.
You've got mail on the Solid Verbal.
We do this as often as we can, definitely a little bit more frequent in the off season, Dan, but why don't we dive right in? We will start with some questions that we got regarding news. We will start with a question from me to you.
Oh, I'm ready.
I sent this one in to my own damn show. Dan Rubenstein,
Yeah.
are college football games too long?
Oh, I saw this topic this morning
Are
because
they
it's in the
too
news.
long? Are they too long? And how do you feel about any of the proposals to try and make them shorter? So a little bit of context.
Give me the context. It's Greg Sankey, yes?
I mean, basically, this is a question that stems from a tweet from a write-up that our friend Ross Dellinger over at SI.com put out earlier today. And it all stems from this growing sense, I guess, that college football games are getting a little bit too long, right? There are 4 proposals that are currently under consideration to try and shorten games. Number 1, prohibiting consecutive timeouts, i.e. icing kickers, that sort of thing. Number 2, no untimed downs at the end of first or third quarters.
Okay.
3, the clock runs after first downs, except inside of 2 minutes and a half. And 4, the clock runs on incompletions once the ball is spotted. Now,
okay,
some interesting ideas there.
Yeah.
For reference, just as a reference point, another reference point, the average NFL game takes about 3 hours and 12 minutes. College football games, at least at last check, around the end of September this year, were about 20 minutes longer. 3 hours, 32 minutes, which is a long time.
Sure.
As of September, that number probably came down a little bit.
That's the standard window as well, right? The TV window. It's a noon Eastern. I mean, obviously things are staggered in different ways, but it's a noon Eastern, and then the next big window is the 3:30 Eastern.
Right. And then just as a non-football reference point, the average Major League Baseball game last season was a shade over 3 hours, 3 hours and 3 minutes. So, look, we've been hearing complaints about the length of college football games for a good long time. It seems as if there are some proposals on the table that could be recommended to a rules committee, which could be enacted at some point. But where do you stand as a father of 2, as a college football, full-time college football podcaster?
Yeah.
Obviously, as a college football fan, are games too long?
Probably, but the caveat, I tweeted this out, I was talking digitally with Andy Staples, is brag much that I know Andy Staples. I don't think it's the games. I don't think there's too much football. I don't think the football lasts too long. It's the totality of the TV broadcast. Like, with our exact rules, if there were an untelevised game for whatever reason, if this were 1998 and it was a pay-per-view Oklahoma-Kansas State game or something, my guess is we'd be talking about a football game that's closer to 2 hours and 26 minutes rather than 3 hours and 32 minutes because of commercials. The issue with football is that it's an incredibly arrhythmic sport, especially in person, right? Where the game's happening and then, there's the TV ref with the neon orange, headset and armband, sleeve, whatever, who is telling people nobody on the field until I say it's okay. It's incredibly arrhythmic, which does not make for a fun experience in person or on TV when you get the touchdown commercial, kickoff commercial, and then it's the beginning of a new drive. That has that CBS feel to it when it would be that huge Alabama LSU game and it would just be commercial sandwiches all the time. It would be a buffet of commercials. And so I just think we need to rethink, with so much money pouring into these TV deals and obviously networks needing to recoup that money via commercials, let's kind of rethink how, I don't know, advertisers are charged. Maybe there are fewer advertisers and it's more of a premium because, there's only going to be 2 commercials during commercial breaks instead of 5 or something. I don't think college football fans, by and large, have a problem with 3.5-hour games per se if a majority of that is football. I think they have a problem with a little bit of chicken fried, Applebee's on a Friday night, whatever those awful, and I know I just conflated 2 different things, a song and an Applebee's commercial.
It's okay. They run together.
Whopper, 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 and like having Pitbull and having Fansville, and like it's cute for a week, and then all of a sudden you've watched more of Fansville than you have Jake Browning or whatever. And so I think it's on the TV networks who now own the sport to figure out how to make the best possible TV product. Because like you mentioned, it's one of those things where it's not necessarily that the game is too long. It's that not everybody is like us and consumes the sport the way that we do, which is 10, 12, 14 hours each Saturday. I'm an Arkansas fan. I want to watch the Arkansas game and I want to watch USC Oregon or Ohio State Michigan. And they're not sitting there for 12, 14 hours. And so people try to plan their days around the games they care about most. And if they're saying, okay, this game starts at 3:30 Eastern, dinner should be cool, and then all of a sudden it goes to overtime and it's 8 p.m. or something, it's not great. I think people like or love or are obsessed with watching football. They're just not obsessed with Applebee's commercials and the place that those things have in our life.
Yeah, one of the notions that I was sensing across social media is, well, if you're a real college football fan, it shouldn't matter. Shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter how long the game is. If you like the sport, you're in it.
Well, it's like
for a
identity
dime and
politics,
for a dollar.
right? Everything is identity politics. Like, you have to prove that you are the most true college football fan with that kind of take. Yeah.
And I don't agree with that.
Right.
I think attention spans are shorter now than they've ever been before. I think our phones are probably in part to blame for that, but that's not the only thing. I think surely if a game is good, if you've got a 51-52 thriller, it doesn't matter how long that game is. Most games aren't like that.
Right.
So there has to be a happy medium. What I found notable in the proposals that Ross laid out in his tweet and in his article, no mention of replay. No mention of replay. I mean, replay for sure has played a huge role in lengthening these games. And for as much as I'm a supporter of replay, when they have to keep going back to look at a play and then another play, it seems like it happened more often than not this past season where you had like consecutive plays being reviewed. That tends to be a little bit much. So I don't know if there is some way we can automate the whole replay thing to a greater degree to maybe knock a little bit of time off of that. One of the other things that Ross called out is that eventually they'd like to get to a system where there's a challenge type system like they've got in the NFL, where maybe not everything is automatically replayed, but coaches can challenge, and we're familiar with that from the NFL. Maybe that is the next iteration of replay to try and shorten things. But look, I'm in favor of this. People are busy. The weekends for the overwhelming majority of the football-loving population, it's a time when you should be able to kick back and relax, and you don't have to work, or if you do have to work, maybe there's a way that you can follow the game on your phone and like get enjoyment from the game. Like, it's supposed to be something that we enjoy. And when it starts feeling like it is taking too long, when people start losing interest in it, that to me sort of defeats the purpose. So to your point, if it's a TV product, if I think the veils are off here, and we all know that college football is being run by the TV networks, then let's find a way to make it as appealing as we can. One other idea that, I know they've talked to various TV executives over the years on the topic of commercials. Let's get creative about how we do in-game advertising, right? Not everything needs to break away from the action. We got graphics. We got the 1st and 10 line can be sponsored by Wendy's. I don't know. I'm not a TV executive, but you get the point.
Yeah, well, after that kickoff, instead of going to commercial as the teams enter the field or something like that, then you have Brad Nessler say, introducing Applebee's new, chicken tinga nachos. Boy, do they look great. Look at those things. All right, let's get going. It's not the worst. It probably affects the bottom line of a bunch of, Wyden and Kennedy type places, the ad firms that are producing all of these commercials. But also, if it's a sport owned by TV networks, the onus is on them to make this the best possible TV show. And so the arrhythmic nature gets people changing the channel. Like you said, it's replay, it's commercials, it's a delay for this, a delay for that. And I think it just behooves everybody to, even if it's not a demonstrably shorter game, if it's a much more rhythmic experience, I think that's the way you capture people and keep them locked into your channel and game.
Here's a free idea.
Please.
For the TV people that are watching out there.
The big fat cats of the networks. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. That was a great voice.
Yeah.
For the people that are listening that have any stake in this game, which is most assuredly nobody, but if you are in any position of influence, we know this in the podcast world, but when we read an ad, it does better than when it sort of gets cut in from somebody else. And there are reasons that you do one versus the other. We're not going to go into that.
Right.
We would encourage everybody to listen to the ads, of course, but we know from our numbers that that's what people pay most attention to. So find some way to do that. Can you get a player to read it? Can you get somebody from the team to read it? Can you get Quint Kessenich to read it on the sidelines, to do whatever ad reads you have to do? That's one way they keep people sort of engaged and not lose interest, not have people tuning away.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think priority number one for all of these networks, aside from completely destroying the sport, which has been the priority these past couple of years.
In the trend, a little bit the trend, yeah.
Is to find a way to make this a TV show that people stay locked in on. And traditional advertising has not been a super fun watch, I don't think, for a lot of people as we gravitate towards a more streaming universe that promises fewer and fewer of the visual of taking in Dr. Pepper, taking in all of these, American Family Insurance. Congrats on the free pub, Dr. Pepper.
Not
American
a sponsor could be. Not a sponsor could be.
But yeah, I think one of those things is, one of the big ideas with this is you can't rest, right? We've seen a lot of sports come and go. Like, this is the next big thing. This is going to be huge forever. And then ratings take a dip. And then they have to rethink where they broadcast and how they broadcast, right? NASCAR was the next big sport, right? You have to be forward thinking with this. You have to be 3 steps ahead with an issue. And right now, unless something, and look, if it's a rules thing, it's a rules thing. But you want to promise that you are concerned about player safety and they should have fewer plays. Great. But also, the experience needs to be, the in-person experience has suffered and the TV experience has suffered. So what does that tell us? We need to go forward and move forward as a sport, not stay where we are or look backwards. Look, if you want to eliminate replay, speaking of moving backwards, I'll listen to that conversation. I know it's going to cause a whole set of this team lost by 3. Well, this toe is clearly in bounds, dragging through the end zone for the game-winning catch that was called out of bounds or incomplete or whatever. I understand that's a whole new host of issues, but I don't know. A rhythmic football game might be enough for me as a jaded college football fan to be able to make peace with that. I'd be willing to listen to the pros and cons of eliminating replay at this point.
Let's go to Brad from Patreon.
Yes.
Dan, you're a Pac-12 guy. Explain to me why George Clavicle's plan, George Kliavkoff, excuse me, Brad, to bring SMU and San Diego State into the conference would make any sense whatsoever.
Rumoredly,
can't see any real tangible value that justifies adding them. So yeah, this is rumored. It's probably a very poorly kept secret at this point. There was a tweet that you sent me from a gentleman, Jason Shear, who said that at a swim and dive championship banquet in Houston yesterday, the San Diego State athletic director told people that the Aztecs will be joining the Pac-12. It will be announced soon. So, this has been reported for a while. The rumors have been there for a while. Where are you at as a Pac-12 fan? How do you feel about all this? Does it make sense? Is it good for the conference?
I feel like as I hear a dog barking in the background, your dog must have a lot of thoughts about West Coast football expansion.
She tends to get boisterous.
Yeah.
As she is right now.
Yeah.
Whenever we talk about things that disgruntle us one way or the other.
Okay. So this is obviously 2 major markets, the Dallas-Fort Worth market with SMU and San Diego, which I don't think is an enormous market, but it's a big place. It's bigger than Eugene, Oregon. It's bigger than Palo Alto. It's bigger, Palo Alto, I guess, is part of the broader Bay Area and Silicon Valley, but bigger than Pullman, Washington. And so I look at San Diego State and I'm like, okay, this is an interesting, at least, right? They've had big basketball success, which is that's not the sport we're talking about here, but as it's a huge campus, I think a ton of kids. Enrollment's pretty huge at San Diego State. They have a history of winning football over the past decade, 12, 15 years. Brady Hoke Part 1, Rocky Long, and now Brady Hoke once again. Big names have come out of that program. I didn't realize the number of names associated with San Diego State, by the way. Like a ton of NFL coaches, obviously Marshall Faulk going back to the 90s. Yeah, it has been a program, not a major program, but that has had an impact on the sport at large. They have the new stadium. They don't have an NFL team anymore. They have a Major League Baseball team. They don't have an NBA team. And with UCLA and USC leaving, I assume there's still going to be a lot of interest in LA and Southern California and UCLA and USC football. But if there are a host of 3-star, borderline 3-4-star type kids who don't get that USC and UCLA offer, but have the ability to stay in Southern California and go to San Diego State, whereas maybe they had otherwise thought, well, I'll go to Arizona, or I'll go to Cal, or I'll go to Oregon State or something like that. You can build up the roster to a Power 5 level at San Diego State, of course. So that to me is at least interesting if you're talking about schools to add value to the conference because of its location, because it has a winning infrastructure to a certain point. SMU hasn't had that as long in the recent past. And I also think where SMU is located, it's like in 14th place in terms of interest of team, right? Because you're talking about, okay, obviously the Cowboys and Texas football and Oklahoma football. You have a playoff team in TCU, a small footprint in terms of an alumni base, but you have the Mavs, you have the Texas Rangers, right? That it's a completely saturated market. And so SMU going from big G5 conference to smallish, medium Power 5 conference, whatever the Pac-10-12 ends up looking like. This is as an outsider, and it's an assumption and it's a guess. How much does that actually move the needle for local fans? Are people going to swarm to SMU games because Oregon State or Cal or Arizona State's in town when so much of that area is consumed with fandom to much larger organizations? So that to me is just sort of, there's somebody we can add, but not really. And so big picture, I think the Pac-12 is in a lot of trouble. If George Clavicle can find a bunch of money via ESPN and streaming services, Amazon obviously is the big name, so be it. Good on him. But in terms of the future of the conference, if you can get that $25 to $30 million per year, it's still dwarfed by the Big Ten and the SEC. But if you can get around that number, and you can get Washington and Oregon at least short term on board to see what can happen with the conference, it's a big win for those two schools because their path to the playoff is super smooth, right? That those are the two teams right now that seem to be building towards, okay, we're in a good spot to get into a 12-team playoff. We have a smooth sailing through this conference because Cal and Stanford and Washington State and Oregon State and the Arizona schools will not build up rosters in this way. Utah's right there. I left Utah out, unfortunately. Utah's also there with Oregon and Washington. They're just not that big name, organizational franchise type name that is coveted on a national level. But yeah, it's smooth sailing for those schools. But then what is the Big 12 going to offer, right? How much do you want to be in on the ground floor of what essentially becomes a startup? I don't know, man. If I'm Oregon and I'm Washington, I sign on short term and see how USC and UCLA like being on an island in the Big Ten. They're going to make a ton of money, but that kind of travel is going to become a lot for those schools. And if the Big Ten is looking to compete with the SEC, to have that big Western division, you could see that being attractive. I'm sure Oregon and Washington would snap up a Big Ten offer in a matter of seconds if it came their way. It's hard to see a Pac-12 existing with San Diego State and SMU existing on anywhere near the level of the SEC and Big Ten come 2030, right?
Here's another question for you.
Do you have any thoughts as an outsider?
Well, my thoughts as an outsider are, I don't feel, if I were a Pac-12...
Because I'm a stakeholder. I want Oregon to succeed. I want Oregon to be on the national stage and keep succeeding. Yeah.
I mean, I like the Pac-12.
Right.
And I don't want to see this kind of turmoil surrounding the conference. I think it sucks royally that USC and UCLA are leaving.
Yep.
I will always associate USC, UCLA with the Pac-12, as many people will. Mm-hmm. As many do with the Houston Astros in the NL, right?
Yeah.
That type of, it's one of those deals for me as a sports fan. My thought is, without any real skin in the game, is that when I see a Twitter posting like the one that we saw about a week ago now, the joint statement, quote, the 10 Pac-12 universities look forward to consummating successful media rights deals in the very near future based upon positive conversations with multiple potential media rights partners over the past few weeks. We remain highly confident in our future growth. And I'm not going to read the rest of it. If you have to say that, that doesn't leave me feeling confident.
Right.
Why post that at all? That to me was a little bit weird. And I do think that the article's been written. This isn't my idea.
Right.
I think there's an outside chance that the whole thing could go bust, depending on how these media rights negotiations go. There's a chance the whole thing could go boom. That if they can't come to an agreement that's beneficial for everybody, we're staring down the barrel of more conference realignment as a result of Pac-12 or Pac-10 or whatever this is, inability to get a deal done. I don't think that's likely, but I think the fact that that's on the table at all, that people have written that article at all in February of 2023,
right?
I don't know. That doesn't leave me feeling all that confident about where things head next. So, the San Diego State move, California better than I do, right? You know California much better than I do. Pulling SMU into this potentially, again, it feels a little weird to me. I don't know. It just seems like you're trying to get numbers as opposed to adding real quality. No offense to SMU people out there. So I don't know. They're in a very awkward spot now because of those two California schools deciding to go and join the Big Ten.
I still am a proponent, and I have no idea how feasible it is because all of a sudden it's not a network necessarily negotiating, or it's not, a conference negotiating with networks. I'm a big proponent of the, what is it when they, on like the NFL Red Zone network where we're going four wide, so many teams in the red zone. I want Oregon, Washington, the Bay Area schools. I'm still micro conference Dan. That's where I'm at. Negotiate your deal. Have deals with the ACC. Have deals with the Big 12. Have deals with the Big 10, right? So you get all these matchups. Have a deal with Notre Dame. Like an annual rotating Oregon or Washington or Stanford with Notre Dame. That seems like a win. That seems like a huge win. Give Notre Dame 2 home games to year 1. Fine, whatever. Sign all sorts of deals and go 4 wide with those that they're in the same geographic footprint, so you can still travel relatively local. You play each other and you sign deals with other conferences and you get to that number, that magic number while controlling your own TV deals, right? Because right now Oregon and Washington kind of have George Clavicle by the gonads, for lack of a better term. So now are they going to get more money like USC probably should have been getting from the Pac-12 under Larry Scott? It's entirely possible that they're going to sign $29 million deals and some of the smaller Pac-12 schools are going to sign $23 million deals. So I'm still that micro conference 4 wide kind of proponent.
Micro conference 4 wide kind of guy. Yeah. This is, by the way, this is directly from Dennis Dodd article. I was looking for it as I was saying it. Quote, industry sources still project a media rights deal split between ESPN and Amazon for the embattled conference.
Right.
However, the dissolution of the Pac-12 is being talked about openly in those same industry circles as a potential consequence if the league does not wrap up its deal soon.
Right.
The fact that it could happen in these tenuous times is enough to project what the process might look like. So that does not instill confidence in any sense.
Look, the most realistic way this all falls apart is the Arizona schools, the corner schools, Arizona schools, Colorado, Utah joining the Big 12. So the Big 12 is now trying to compete with the other mega conferences without the headline names. But in terms of the depth of quality teams, they're approaching. They're absolutely approaching. When you add Utah, who's been a top 10, 12, 15 national program lately, Colorado has more juice because of Dion. Arizona, both Arizona schools have been to conference championship games, so we know what those look like built up. So then the Big 12 becomes a lot more interesting. And then you're left with the Bay Area schools and the Pacific Northwest schools. And so then you're going to see the Sharks, right? The Sharks are going to be swimming in the water for that chum. And somebody's going to pick up Oregon and Washington, be it the Big 10, be it, some sort of affiliation with other conferences, but not fully joining the other conferences. And then where does that leave Oregon State and Washington State?
I mean, it puts us right back to where we were like a year ago.
Right.
It puts us right back into the meat of that discussion where, honestly, if we're talking about one whole conference shuttering and teams scattering, now we're talking about what happens with Notre Dame. Now we're talking about what happens with Florida State. These conferences.
Well, the ACC grant of right things. They're
the
just so
grant of
hard to
rights
get out
thing
of that. Yeah.
It's crazy, but, we're starting to have those types of conversations again. And we're right back to square one. People were not happy about that conversation with regard to USC and UCLA.
Yeah.
People were very affected by that. And we saw a lot of the emails and the comments. It left a lot of people feeling like college football was going to a bad, dark place. And, maybe it's still headed there, but we'll see where this goes. The Pac-12
It's
definitely interesting to follow.
Would have been interesting. I know there were conversations, right? The Big 12 and Pac-12 aligning themselves with each other, but they couldn't figure it out in terms of a value add and like, is it worth it to add these teams into like a semi deal or something like that? That would have been a move from the Pac-12 signaling we don't have anywhere else and have no other exit plan. So we're going to take $22 million each instead of, gambling on ourselves in the open market. And so that would have been a signal that it was waving the white flag as a sovereign nation.
Nat K. Scott on Instagram. What's
Please.
the best SEC schedule format for the fans? For the fans. So, speaking of super conferences, we got news last week. Texas and Oklahoma officially joining the SEC starting with the 2024 season. The 2024 season, by the way, is shaping up to be a pretty monumental season. It's not just when I think we're going to get USC and UCLA over in the Big Ten, but obviously Texas and Oklahoma now joining the SEC. The start of the new playoff format, the 12-team playoff format. Also get the video game in 2024. So a lot happening the season after this one that's coming up here at the end of 2023. But I think as a result of going up to 16 teams now in the SEC, they are going to be doing away with the divisional model that they've had. This is the last year for it in 2023. And they're going to be changing up how they schedule games. So there are two formats that it appears the SEC is centered around, and it's been this way for a while. The first is 8 conference games with 1 permanent rival, or 9 conference games with 3 permanent rivals, Dan. Which is the format that you most prefer?
I like the 3 permanent rivals. I like 3 permanent rivals, and get me some ping pong balls on TV, right? Get me some representative from Texas A&M reaching into a big old bag of ping pong balls and having conspiracy theories around it and having to raise up LSU. And I don't know why they're using a vaguely European accent, but I think that's going to be a requirement. LSU! And I am for that. I am for 3 permanent rivals. Well, wait, it was 3 permanent rivals or what?
3 permanent rivals, 9 conference games and 3 permanent rivals,
right.
Or 8 conference games and 1 permanent rival.
Oh, the 3. Definitely the 3. There's too much bad blood and there's too much scar tissue within that conference already. And I don't know if it's a thing where you split it into micro divisions where it's just 4 team divisions, if my math is right, 16 total teams. Whatever the case is, I want the 3. I want Alabama to be every year playing Tennessee, Auburn, and LSU. I just do. And I'm good. I think enough teams can figure out enough permanent rivals that make sense. And then the rest of it is open. The rest of it is open. The rest of it's ping pong balls. So we got all the teams playing all the teams much more often than we do now. And we have some sort of ceremony. And, it's a big deal in whatever it is in January or February or something like that when the schedules are determined FIFA style. And there's already conspiracy theories now. Why not put those conspiracy theories in 4K on the SEC network?
I love it. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with 9 and 3. I think the 9 and 3 model is the one that I like the most. You may not be an SEC fan. I know we got a lot of Midwesterners that listen to this show. You may not be a big fan of the SEC, and that's fine. That's your right. It is good football.
Oh, it's great.
It is good football. It is, I think, the highest level conference in college football. And so I want to see more of that. And I like the fact that in doing away with the divisional structure, it means a team like Georgia is not going to be locked into playing Vanderbilt and South Carolina and Kentucky every year. No disrespect to those schools, but I'd like to see what Georgia can do against some other opponents on a more regular basis. And this would get us to that point. This would get us to the point of not having to wait 12 years in between matchups against some other hated rivals or competitive schools on the other side of the conference.
It also more openly integrates Texas and Oklahoma into
Absolutely.
it weaves them into the fabric of the SEC, the quilt that is SEC football. So you get Texas in Williams-Brice and in Neyland and in Samford and in Tuscaloosa. You get Texas at Tuscaloosa this year, right? But then you get Florida in Norman. You get Ole Miss in Norman. You get Tennessee at Texas. You get that more often where you get all of the fan bases intermingling a little bit more, the schools intermingling a little bit more. And if it is this new era of SEC football, it's for lack of a better term, it's like the positionless idea of sports, right? That you're just like, no, you're not locked in on a division just because that's what the title says you should be. There's nothing terribly traditional about playing your fourth most hated rival in a conference. There just isn't. And I know there's scar tissue and I know there's battle wounds and all that stuff between these two teams because of this one game 4 years ago. You're still going to play them. Maybe not every year, but you get those locked in 3 and then you spread it all around and it's novel every year. That's great. That to me is the secret sauce.
Yeah, I'm for more SEC games.
The spice of life.
I'm for the 9-3 model for sure.
Yeah.
Not even a question. All right. Let's go to Cole
Please.
Schwartz on Twitter. He says, as a diehard Wisconsin fan, give me the ceiling for this year's team. Am I an idiot for thinking 10-2 is realistic? So look, we did an episode like last week where we talked through our coach draft, new coaches, and we picked 2 teams of 5. The first overall pick for me was Luke Fickell. It would have been for you as well if you had the choice. We talked about that as well. But I am on the record saying that 10-2 is very realistic. That I tend to be overly optimistic about new coaches and new places, but I like Luke Fickell a lot. I think Wisconsin's still in a pretty good spot. I like what they did in the transfer portal. The schedule is conducive to it. There are a lot of things that are very much in their corner. So I think it's realistic. I don't think you're an idiot. That's not to say they'll get to 10-2, but I think it's a very high floor for Wisconsin, and I think 10-2 is there. You weren't quite as optimistic about Wisconsin, but even you, I think, acknowledged that if you squint, if you look at all the factors here going into the 23 season for the Badgers, 10-2, it's not unrealistic, Dan.
No, it's not unrealistic. It doesn't happen a ton in a scenario in which a new coach wins double-digit games in his first season, just because, generally speaking, there's a reason why a school has a new coach, right? That the old coach is bailing for whatever reason, and maybe it's lack of confidence in the future of the team, or maybe just sees the grass greener elsewhere, or they're bad and need a new coach because they got rid of the old guy. So this year was an especially good year for new coaches to come in and win double-digit games. When you look at Washington, you look at USC, you look at TCU, Oregon, depending on if you count the bowl game. I tend not to. They were a 9-3 team that won a bowl game, but even still flirting with it in that place. So it's entirely possible. We talked about their schedule. We talked about improvement, what we perceive to be improvement at quarterback, improvement perhaps in scheme. The defense isn't where it was a couple of years ago, but once again, I think they miss Michigan and Penn State. Is that correct on their schedule?
I believe so. I believe that's accurate, yeah.
So that's a great place to start. I know they traveled to Wazoo, right? They return that trip. They lost to Wazoo at Camp Randall last season. But all things considered, it's a great schedule for a first-year coach to get acclimated to a new conference and new program. So yes, it's a 10-2 with 3.5 breaks, right? Couple strokes of luck, maybe a doinked field goal, an injured quarterback, bad weather, or something like that. But it's attainable. But it's also, 7-5 is on the table because there was a reason why Wisconsin took a downturn. And some of that was talent acquisition. Some of it was talent leaving. Some of it was talent not being used correctly. I think it's a lot to ask. But yes, I'll stand by 3.5 breaks can get you to double-digit wins. If you gave me even money either way, I would go under. If you said 9.5, but it's a universe exists absolutely in which they can get there.
Dan, let's move on. Let's talk about the Georgia offense. Gary on Patreon asks, does Todd Monken's departure to the NFL set Georgia's offense back? So Todd Monken, offensive coordinator, hired to the same position with the Baltimore Ravens, so he's going pro. And Mike Bobo, a name from Georgia's past. I believe was an analyst on the staff, was he not?
This past year?
Something like that. I don't know. Mike Bobo's back as offensive coordinator.
Yeah, he was most recently a coordinator in the SEC as a full-time job. Does it set their offense back? Absolutely. In a meaningful way, in an appreciable way? I don't know. Well, here's the thing. So we have a new quarterback who's presumably younger than 25. We have a team that's not going to be reliant on scoring 40 points to win. Despite what they lose once again on defense, they are built and they have built themselves up in such a way where they need to score 24 points a game to win. And most offensive coordinators with the talent on hand will be able to score 24 points with this team. Now, whoever wins that job is probably going to be starting in a better place than Stetson Bennett did, with how much Bennett moved around and was counted out and didn't have the confidence of his coaches. You'd think whoever gets the job this year will be more empowered at quarterback with the job immediately. But it's a lot to start over with a new quarterback and a new coordinator. It has to be the vision of Kirby. It has to be the vision of the guys they do return on the offensive coaching staff. So yes, I think they're going to take a step back, but I'm also excited to see what Bobo can do. He is still considered to be a good offensive mind. Has had some health issues. I just, for the short term, because of the lack of experience on this offense, I think they're going to be more conservative than they've been these past couple years. I think they are going to be happy to get up to a medium amount, right? To get up 27-10 and sit. To get up 21-3, 21-7 and sit and just shorten that game even more than Greg Sankey already wants to shorten games. They're going to absolutely crockpot every week in the short to medium term. So yeah, I think it's going to change the complexion of the Georgia offense. I don't think they're going to succeed less in the wins and losses columns.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things that I'd point out.
Yeah.
Right. Mike Bobo was there for a good long time under Mark Richt. So Georgia fans are familiar with Mike Bobo. He was there this past season as an offensive analyst, and his role on that squad really was to do self-scouting and to look at whatever Monken was doing and figure out ways to either avoid tipping off plays or make things more efficient or make them better. So he's familiar with the offense that's been installed at Georgia. He knows the verbiage, and there's been some commentary out there that he doesn't want to change it too much. He doesn't want to be like he's starting things from square one, because obviously what they've done has been really successful.
Right.
So that's the first thing. If I were a Georgia fan, I'd at least feel heartened by that. I don't think it's going to be any kind of tectonic shift. It might be a little bit more conservative. I think that's fair to say. But the second point, the players that are on Georgia's squad now are so much better than they were the last time he was there.
Sure.
Right? If he had Brock Bowers back in the old day, if he had Darnell Washington back in the old day, like perhaps we would see a different version of the Mike Bobo offense, as opposed to the one that, some would say was all too happy to just run it every play, right? To lean too heavily on the ground game. So I don't think it's going to take any step back in a meaningful way, as you described. I mean, they're so talented up and down that roster that the run pass splits might look a little different. Maybe they're not as explosive as they were under Todd Monken just because of the play calling. But by and large, I think Georgia's just in such a good place with their talent that as long as they remain at that really high level on the defensive side of the ball, which I think we've come to know and expect at this point, the offense is always going to be in a position to score points and succeed. So I'm not too worried about it. I hate retreads, but I think just given the fact that he's been around the program, he's a hell of a motivator by all accounts. I mean, people like playing for him. So I think it'll be fine.
Here's the devil's advocate is that Kirby has not hit 1,000, is not bad at 1,000 in terms of quarterback decisions, quarterback evaluation, offensive coordinators. The tail end of the Jim Chaney, Jake Fromm experiment wasn't great. Right? And they weren't as talented as they are now. They couldn't get away with mediocrity on offense in the way that they could hypothetically now because of where the defense is. But this is now the era that it's Kirby Smart dealing with attrition as part of the success, right? The attrition of coaches. In successive years, he's now lost a defensive coordinator and an offensive coordinator. Who wouldn't want to coach at Georgia? Who wouldn't want to recruit at Georgia? Who wouldn't want to be responsible for that level of success at Georgia, right? It's a crazy enticing set of coordinator jobs. But also, success isn't guaranteed. Success is just not guaranteed. We're coming off of a year in which Alabama, who's had everything in the world, not make the playoff, not even win the SEC West, right? It's entirely possible with a roster full of NFL players to not win your division, to not win your conference as one of the 2, 3, 4 most talented teams in the nation. And so I don't think anything's guaranteed, but this year, I think the train will keep running well. Next year, so 2024, new teams in the conference, because you know how everybody's scared of Texas right now.
Sure.
And Oklahoma's defense. It's a question. It's a question what the actual long-term plan is for Georgia's offense and who that quarterback is. You know, they pushed all their chips to the middle for Arch Manning and it didn't work out. And so again, they'll be just fine, but what's the next phase? What's Kirby 3.0 look like at Georgia? That to me is an interesting question because again, nothing guaranteed even with a back-to-back national champion.
Yeah, we'll see. They tried to fill that vacancy very quickly. As soon as Monken was gone, it was Mike Bobo's job.
Yeah.
So clearly continuity is something that Kirby's put a premium on, and they're going to try to keep this train rolling. But like you said, there are going to be new faces. Success is never guaranteed, even though the guy had a lot of success there before, and he did have a lot of success there before.
Right.
There's no guarantee that this next iteration will produce the same result. I think they'll be fine. I don't see any reason to really doubt it, but it is a fair question.
Yeah, things are looking a little bit better than they could just because Florida seems to be a mess, seems to be an ice floe on fire headed out to sea. But other than that, Tennessee has improved, but showed itself to be not quite ready for primetime last year in Athens. And look, South Carolina's coming up. Kentucky has shown flashes of danger, but that specific division as currently constituted, it's got to be Florida and Tennessee as the threat, that's a dual threat, whatever, to Georgia's dominance. And right now, it's not a 2023 problem for the Dogs, it seems.
Is Florida really going to start Graham Mertz as its starting quarterback?
As opposed to...
Man...
Yeah, as far as I can tell, yeah.
Sorry, Florida fans. I hate to do that to you. Let's close it out on this day. We got a bunch of other questions. Maybe we'll save those for our Thursday show, if you're cool with that.
Sure, let's do it.
A lot of good ones here. I wanted to close this one out with an email that we got from Kevin.
Okay.
Very specific email. What does Syracuse do with Dino Babers? We had one great season, a bunch of 5 and 7s, went 7-5 after starting 6-0 this past year. I don't think we should extend him anytime soon, but I don't know who would a better hire be. I'm not delusional and think Syracuse should be 10-2 every season.
Right.
But 8-4 seems reasonable from Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. That's a good question. We like Dino on the show. We always have. A couple reference points just to throw them out there. In terms of returning production, which is not everything, but is a meaningful number, especially for a school like Syracuse. They're a top 25 team in terms of returning production. 73% on offense, 72% on defense. That's inside the top 40 on both fronts. So got enough coming back to hopefully continue some of the momentum from last season. I would also add that the schedule looks beautiful on some level.
Sure.
There is a stretch in the middle of the season, last week of September through the middle of October, where it's Clemson at North Carolina at Florida State. But otherwise, it's Colgate, it's Western Michigan, it's at Purdue, it's Army, at Virginia Tech, Boston College, home against, the neutral site game, against Pitt, the one that they're playing in Yankee Stadium now, at Georgia Tech, close out the year against Wake Forest. So I'm not counting anything as a surefire win for Syracuse. However, outside of those 3 games in the middle of the season that feels like a pretty workable schedule. So what I would say here is whatever you want to do with Dino Babers, it will probably be very clear after this season, because this is a schedule and this is a roster that's got enough back and that's got, I think, enough runway here with this slate that if they want to win 8 games, seems like it's there.
Okay. All good points, Ty. Do you know how many 8-win seasons Syracuse has as an ACC team? So since 2013. If 8-3 is a reasonable expectation sometimes.
One. Yeah.
One win. In the Big East since 2000. Okay? So going back to 2000, so that's the Paul Pasqualoni era. How many 8-win seasons do they have in the Big East in the regular season? 8-4 plus type seasons since 2000, because they actually did, under Donovan McNabb, they were a good team. Yeah. So 2000 just feels more modern era. So 2001, they go 10-3 after the bowl, 9-3, top 15 team. After that, the number of 8-win seasons in the Big East in the regular season is 0. So it's nice to say, and maybe the schedule will work out, as it definitely did a couple years ago when they won 10 games. If you remember, they played a bunch of all kind of overrated ACC teams and pulled those out with a senior quarterback they got very lucky on, in Eric Dungy, who I think is from Portland, Oregon. Eric, your guy, Eric Dungy. The evidence is not there that Syracuse should be an 8-ish win team more often than not. And that's generally not because on paper they look like they could be, but in practice, this is not a team that can recruit a 2-deep that can compete with the upper half of the ACC consistently in an average year. And so I think bowl should be the expectation at Syracuse, all things considered, with the amount of dedication or lack of dedication, however you want to view it for Syracuse. I think Dino's fine. I think he's absolutely fine. The weird thing, the thing I would be concerned about is cash money, because they don't seem to keep coordinators around ever. And so maybe that's a good reflection on Dino Babers' ability to evaluate new assistant coaches and hires and everything like that. But it doesn't seem like they're matching buyouts or matching, okay, we're all for you were raised to stay, instead of going to coach, Nebraska's defense, Tony White. And so lack of turnover is concerning. Ability to recruit and build up that 2-deep to win 8 games more often than not, pretty concerning. Interesting home field advantage in whatever they're calling the Carrier Dome now. JMA Wireless. Did I get that right?
JMA Wireless.
Look at me.
Look at you.
I don't know. It's an on paper thing, and the ACC is in a weird place right now. But even still, you start 6-0, then everybody realizes you don't have a defensive front and run straight at them, and there's nothing you can do, and your quarterback gets hurt. There's very little wiggle room. There's very little margin for error at Syracuse, and so who do they got just demolished in that year? They went 10. I think it was Notre Dame, right? Yankee Stadium.
I believe so.
They lost like 35-3.
Yeah, and
so that's the issue, where you just don't have a 12-game roster, and I think you win 6 or 7 at Syracuse. It's pretty good. And Dino Babers has by and large done that.
Dino's been there since 2016. Went to a bowl this past year. Went to a bowl back in 2018. Hasn't gone to a bowl at any point beyond that. A lot of 5 and 7s and 4 and 8s in here for Dino Babers. The one season where they did go 10-3, they finished up 10-3. That was the year where they had a top 15 offense, right? Yeah. I don't think this is ever going to be the kind of program that is driven by defense. Dino's an offensive guy. If he can get offense out there, then we're talking. Then we're talking, I think, expectations.
But it kind of was driven by defense these past couple of years to go 5 and 7. Yeah. 6 and 6. To go 5 and 7, to go 6 and 6, even still has not fielded a top 50 defense. So relatively speaking, defense has been okay, but the offense has not been there to match and to hold up its end of the bargain. Maybe that'll be different this coming season. I don't know. But I tend to agree with you. I don't know if the historical data is there to suggest that Syracuse can get there to be a consistent 8-4 team,
But what I am saying as we look forward now into 23, the schedule's there for it. And
Sure.
the roster is there, I think, to go 8-4 if they want to. Not a whole lot of teams on that schedule that really put the fear of God into you. Even on the road at North Carolina with some of their turnover, with how they've underperformed on defense.
Yeah.
It's not a stretch to envision a shootout in which Syracuse comes away winning.
Sure.
But I think this is the year. This is like the litmus test for Dino. If you're a Dino fan, if you believe in Dino, if he can get everything going in the same direction, you can envision an 8-4 season. If not, if he goes 5-7 again against a schedule like this, then maybe there's a reason for some healthy skepticism.
And it's also because I remember the end of the Purdue game. Was there another game that Syracuse eked out? Like, they're just always going to be 8 points. Like, the swing between 7-5 and 4-8 is going to be so tiny, right? That margin, I'm pulling up what they did this year. It's just, when you have that kind of coach turnover, especially, it's just, when you don't have that, any sort of successful continuity, it seems. So they lost 5 straight. They lost by 6, 17, 10, 35, and 10 once again. And so in their wins, they beat Purdue last second. They eke by Virginia by 2. So really, they go 7-5 this year, and they're like 90 seconds from going 5-7.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's just, it doesn't give me a lot of confidence that they're able to build up that roster to like, oh, our left guard went down, our weak side linebacker went down, and we're not going to miss that much of a beat, which is what better teams are able to do. And so they obviously didn't have it at quarterback when they got hurt there. Yeah, I just think they're right around 500.
We shall see. Solidverbal@gmail.com, as always, is the email address. That does it for today. We've got a bunch more questions that I'm going to save.
Nice.
And that we're going to use for our Thursday show. We had folks chiming in. We can give folks more time to send in their questions as well. Don't forget to hit us up on social media. The aforementioned email address is always open as well. If you're into the old school means of communication, we will be checking that in time for the Thursday episode. But keep the questions coming. Don't forget to hit subscribe or follow, whatever it is your podcasting app of choice allows you to do. 2 episodes every week. If you want the bonus stuff, verballers.com is where you can go to sign up for the Patreon, get access not just to the bonus content, but also to the Discord server, which continues to be a lively place to talk about college football and really anything else. We'd encourage you to check that out if you are ever so inclined to be a little bit more of an official member of the Verballerhood, of course.
I just came
Everybody
up,
listens
as you were saying that, I came up with the stupidest idea I've ever come up with for an episode.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm only going to talk about it on an episode on verballers.com on our Bruin or something, some sort of special reveal there. Yeah, that's it.
Dan, happy President's Day.
Hey,
okay?
you as well. Hope you get a new mattress or something to take advantage of the sales.
For that guy, Dan, for myself, Ty, thanks again for tuning on in. We will talk to you all soon. Stay solid.
Peace.